I think the real reason is because Mary Wells was a superstar, a great singer. A lot of people still remember her, and there's been no book done on her at all, ever, and certainly not since her death in 1992, which was not too long ago for people to forget her, but was a long time to have no book about her. If you don't know, let me just tell you what her achievements were in life. She was the first Motown female solo superstar, which meant a big deal at the time because Motown was looking for a solo superstar, and she was the one. I'll tell you in a few minutes about how she made that great. Right with her first hit, her first song on Motown, the first song she ever sang in a recording studio, went to number 41 on the Billboard Popular Music chart, which was a great achievement, especially since at that time, as a lot of you probably know, the pop chart was considered the white chart, and the R&B chart was considered the black chart. So Mary crossed over from the R&B chart to the pop chart and went to 41, in the top 100, which for a first time singer, she ever did a top 100 hit song on the first day of work, because Motown later claimed that she couldn't have done it without them training her, but that's kind of contradicted by the fact that she walked in off the street and got a number 41 hit. Then for the rest of her career at Motown, I'm simplifying it a bit, but her hits kept getting higher and higher. She went up the chart over 2 or 3 years, until in 1964 she hit number 1 with My Guy, which was an international super hit. It was a hit all across the U.S. on the white and the black charts, and also was a big hit in London, which was an absolute first for a Motown artist, and one of the very few black women who've been able to make it on the UK charts, which was a really big deal. As a result, by the way, the Beatles asked her to be the first American to open their tour of the UK, which is such a big honor that no one could really believe it. And she went around with them. I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. She was also first on the Motown label with a Billboard Top 10 chart hit, first with a number 1 single, and first to record a Motown album. So she was first on almost everything at Motown, and absolutely first for a female solo singer. She paved the way for all the other Motown singers who came after her, including Diana Ross, Martha and the Vandellas, the whole line of them that are still going. So that's why I thought she'd be an interesting subject for a book. And I couldn't believe that she had actually had no book done on her, when there are lots of other people, including Flo Ballard, who had already had books done on her. So the next question I'm usually asked is, how did I actually decide to write a book on her, aside from the fact that she was a big achiever? I'll go back in my past just a little bit. I was a reporter for the Detroit Free Press. I had written, this shows how old I am, but when Woodward and Bernstein did their expose of the White House and President Nixon resigned, investigative reporting became a big deal. No one had ever heard of it before, at least by that name. So a friend of mine, another reporter for the paper, his name is Dave Anderson, he and I said, geez, we ought to get into this. It sounds good. Let's go to the library. And nothing, no computer there. Let's go to the library and see if we can get a book that'll tell us how to do this investigative reporting stuff. So we went over to the library and found out there were no books on it anywhere. None had ever been published. So we had one of these great moments where we looked at each other and said, hey, we do this kind of stuff. Maybe we should write the first book on investigative reporting. And that's exactly. This time I was sitting there so trying to hide, and he came out and said, look, I hear that Flo Ballard, who used to be in the Supremes, is on welfare, which at the time in Detroit was like Joe Biden's on welfare or something. It's like, really? So I said, okay, I'll go get it. I drove out to her house, waited to see her. I'll cut the story short, but I interviewed her, and she wasn't too pleased. She was on welfare, as it turned out. She wasn't too pleased about me interviewing her, but she was very gratified when the story came out. I'd written it gently, and she was pleased that instead of people going, what a shame, here you earn these millions, now you're living off the public. It wasn't that kind of reaction. It was, how did this happen to you? What can we do to help you? How can we get you started? Very sympathetic. So she called me back to her house and asked me to come over, after work and help her write her biography. So I thought, this is great. The reaction to the story was great. Now I can write another book. So I taped her for several weeks after work, getting her own life history. And I didn't know it, but this was the year before she died. So it turned out to be a very timely thing for her and me. Then she died. I tried to sell the book with no success, but there was only a few months. And then she died. And then I really stepped up my attempt to sell the book. I went to Grove. I was living in Detroit, but I came to Grove Press here in New York, which used to be a much bigger press than it is now. It's now called Grove Atlanta. At that time, they published a lot of those French semi-obscene books. They weren't really obscene, but the courts kept banning them. So it was a big controversial press. And I went to see them, and they said, "Oh, that sounds like a good idea, but no one's ever written a book about Motown records." And I realized as soon as they said it that they were right. I'd never seen a book. Here it is on records. The Lost Supreme, The Life of Jane Girl Florence Ballard. You'll note there's my name at the bottom, but you can barely see it. They're trying to make you think she wrote it. But in fact, she had given me a lot of the information on the So this guy, Randy Russey, called me and he says, "Look, there was a great book, but I got a much better subject for you, Mary Wells." Now, I already knew about Mary Wells in general, and I really exploded at Randy. Come off 2 years of writing this book and 32 years of trying to sell it. So I said, "Randy, come on. Another African-American young girl from Detroit who joins Motown and then makes it really big there and then is thrown out, spends the rest of her life trying to get back on her feet. You just want me to change the names, Lost Supreme, put it out again? Come on, I couldn't do that." So very calmly, calm me down. I said, "Okay, Peter, listen, I'm going to tell you the true story of Mary Wells." And he goes through this all week. For about 45 minutes, he lectured me on how different Mary Wells was from Flo Valley. And he finally convinced me that I should do this book, which is the book that you see here with a very nice cover, I think. Sort of Google-like cover, actually, instead of the letter. And a great picture of her on stage. And that's the book that came out. But let me tell you for a minute what made Mary different from Flo. It's the reason that I got very interested in her as a person, although I never met her. One was her absolute determination to make it in the record world. She was determined about everything, and as I said, making the record world was the big thing. She grew up in Detroit. Her father was absent, except when he'd come over and beat up her mother, who was a house cleaner. And she got spinal meningitis while she was in grade school. She spent 2 years on her back in a hospital bed trying to recover from it. So was always 2 years behind all the other kids. Then she got TB and had to drop out of school for a while. Nevertheless, with that kind of background, she pushed through grade school, middle school, and high school and graduated. So to some extent, and to a great extent, she was obviously very determined. Then she decided she wanted to go into the music business, which is a tough business, as everyone knows. But there were lots of street corner groups in Detroit. She tried to break into them. Some of them didn't want her in there. They pushed her out. She kept trying. Finally, she got the idea. She got a crush on Jackie Wilson, who was a big singer at the time. And she thought, well, maybe I should write a song for him. She had no songwriting experience, but she says, I'll write a song for Jackie Wilson. Maybe that way I can get into the music business. So she knew Berry Gordy, who was then running the relatively new Motown record company, had in the past written songs for Jackie Wilson. So first of all, she did what she said was, she went into her closet, her secret closet, and asked God to give her a song that she could write, that she could sell to Gordy, who would give it to Jackie Wilson. And the song Bye Bye Baby occurred to her. So she wrote it down, lyrics and the music. And now her problem was to try to reach Gordy, who didn't like people pestering him all the time. So she arranged with this other guy who wanted to date a girlfriend of hers to meet Gordy when he was escorting two of his own groups who were playing at the 20 Grand, which was a big club in Detroit at the time. he was running back and forth, making sure both groups were doing their thing in different sections of this large club. She was allowed in by prearrangement, and she kept asking him, Mr. Gordy, can I have an appointment to see you so I can sing the song for you, for Jackie Wilson? He kept going, just ignored her. She kept in lockstep with him. Mr. Gordy, Mr. Gordy, Mr. Gordy, you gotta help me. You gotta listen to the song. It's a great song. Finally, he just got annoyed. He turned around and said, okay, all right, just freaking sing it right now. I don't have time for this. So she sang it right there. The song was Bye Bye Baby, which ended up being her first hit. And the next, he said, okay, that's real good. Come on in tomorrow. We'll record it, and we'll go from there. Of course, he never gave it to Jackie Wilson because, first of all, it was a better song, and also, he didn't work for Wilson anymore. She just didn't know that. He didn't work for Wilson, but it was all over. But anyway, it became her first Motown hit, and that's a story that's true, but it also became legendary in Detroit because, you know, she pushed herself forward and she actually made it. That was the one way she was determined. Another way she was determined was in trying to find a husband, which was a great story in itself. It takes up some substantial portion of the book. She first married, she was really determined to get a good family life going because of her own family life, which she disliked. So as soon as she saw a likely candidate, whose name was Herman Griffin, he was her band leader, her first band leader at Motown. She basically courted him, they got married, and they lived together for a couple of years. Then he cheated on her very publicly. He actually made it with a prostitute at a party of which a lot of her friends were attending, but she wasn't. So she was through with him. She divorced him. Then she married Cecil Womack, who's the brother of Bobby Womack. And in fact, there were 5 brothers. Cecil was a great musician, still alive in fact, and they stayed together for 13 years, or excuse me, 11 years, and had 4 children. Then she did the really amazing thing, which shows her real determination. She decided, after 11 years and 4 children, that Cecil was holding her back in her career, and he wasn't supporting her enough to drive her to regain the top of the charts. So she divorced him and moved in with his brother, Curtis, which really got people going. You know, and this led me to a big study of what marrying 2 brothers in a row was like in cultural terms. In some countries, it's the thing to do. That is, if one brother dies, let's say an older brother dies, leaving a widow, another brother who isn't married is expected, if he can, to marry the widow in order to protect her. In other words, it's socially not only acceptable, but semi-required. In the U.S., as I found out when asking a lot of people about